I recall how the sun hit the mist over the creek that morning, soft, gold-tinged, almost otherworldly. It was the sort of light that led you to stop, take deep breaths, and forget the world for a few moments. But I did not have a few moments. I had work. The ground I had purchased 6 months prior, out beyond the edge of evergreen bluffs, was raw and rough and still learning to trust me. There were thistles to clear away, banks to buttress, and a ribbon of creek that breathed old tales as it wound past stones and roots I hadn't gotten around to naming yet. I was operating my 1989 Komatsu Bulldozer, solid and stubborn the way only old steel can be. I was building up the west bank 63 feet from creek's edge, far back of any waterline, with flags that I'd driven in myself to define the legal areas. That's when the unmarked black SUV pulled up. 3 men in identical navy polos got out, sunglasses and smugness. On their chests in large white print were the words HOA Compliance Enforcement. The tall one grabbed a megaphone and yelled, "Operator of the dozer, shut down and move away from the equipment." Perplexed, I shut down the machine, got off, and met them halfway. They said I was infringing on environmental protection, running heavy equipment within a Class C waterway. When I told them I was within lawful range and preventing erosion, not creating it, the shortest of the 3, a clipboard in hand, declared I was to be hit daily with fines and possible lien placement. That word, lien, always sticks like one drawing a threat from their holster. But I had a few questions of my own, specifically, under what legal power were they acting? That's when their armor crumbled. Turns out their authority was thinner than their badgeless uniforms permitted. They worked for the Evergreen Bluffs HOA, not the city, not the county. No state-deputized authority, just a homeowner's board with a god complex. They had no idea who I was. See, I didn't simply purchase the land. I purchased the watershed, the upstream spring, the downstream wraparound, the creek, the banks, and the water rights, all via a private off-market deal from a tired old rancher named Tom Mills who'd spent years battling the HOA. I stood on my porch and watched the men leave that morning, wishing I'd crumple. But I'd seen that tactic before, in Kabul, in Kandahar, except the clipboards were guns and the threats weren't printed on letterhead. The next day, they came back in greater numbers, 2 SUVs, 1 compliance officer complete with a manufactured gold star pinned to his chest like it meant something. Delaney, he called himself. Chief Compliance Officer. An unofficial title from an unenforceable badge. They gave me a packet full of newly printed violations and promised legal arbitration. I asked again, under what authority? They quoted a passage from the HOA bylaws, Section 6B on environmental disturbance in jurisdictional buffer zones. Convenient, since city zoning had never recognized those zones. That's when I produced a deed, the actual one, stamped and marked by the county clerk with parcel overlays. It listed me as the lawful owner of everything contained in that so-called protected buffer zone. They departed again, this time silent. Later that night, I set to work. I sent certified letters to the HOA board, to city authorities, to the zoning bureau. I faxed Lisa from the local newspaper a condensed timeline and proposed an examination of the HOA's own unapproved additions, a bridge, benches, drain pipes, all now occupying illegal space on private property. Then I waited. As predicted, within days I received a formal HOA violation notice setting up a closed-door board hearing regarding my unauthorized land disturbance. It was lettered and formatted like a court document. Still nothing about the sale of the parcel. That's when I delved into their bylaws and discovered the true trick, hidden in Section 9. Any community green space sold is still subject to HOA behavioral jurisdictional code unless the new owner submits an exemption within 60 days. Not a law. Not acknowledged by any government agency. Simply a mythic leash they hoped I wouldn't find out about. But I did. I submitted the proper documents in arrears, stamped and dated, withdrawing any assumed HOA authority effective the day my deed closed. Then it got ugly. The HOA hired bullying out an environmental consulting firm wrote to me stating I'd been referred for a non-binding site review. I refused. I also asked the county to conduct their inspection on the HOA's infrastructure. Within days, a county hydrologist stood alongside me at the East Bank, taking measurements of unapproved runoff flowing into my creek. The HOA was served an official environmental citation a week later. For once, the clipboard was mine. The next board meeting, I appeared with clean boots, a document-filled binder, and a quiet assurance. Neighbors who had previously shunned eye contact nodded now. I stood and related my tale, not the facts, but the reason behind the struggle, that this wasn't about soil, or water, or bulldozers, it was about respect. When Delaney's name was mentioned, a neighbor stood and said, "I move to open nominations for HOA president." The motion carried. Nominations were opened. A voice from the back said, "I nominate John Weller." I attempted to laugh, attempted to step back, but then there was a whisper of voices seconding the motion. And so I accepted, not pride, but because someone had to turn the wheel toward change. Delaney resigned by email the following day. The transition wasn't smooth, but it was honest. The first thing I did was freeze all fines levied over the past 6 months and ordered a complete review. I began knocking on doors, listening to people like Sharon Park, ticketed for wind chimes, or Raj Patel, who was once ticketed for a lavender hedge. Then we held a town hall, not in the usual clubhouse, but out beneath the oaks by the creek. String lights, folding chairs, children climbing trees, neighbors speaking like neighbors again. That is when we voted to make the land Weller Creek Commons. Still in my name, still owned by me privately, but openly shared, daylit, and guarded not by intimidation, but by stewardship. Volunteers arrived with rakes, paint, and flowers. Teens constructed benches. Retirees set sunflowers and native grasses. We posted signs that said private property, publicly cherished, accessed by owner's permission. The former HOA quarterly newsletter was rebranded as The Commons, and rather than warning notices, it had photos: children fishing, frogs sticking out of reeds, initials carved into the railing of the old footbridge. One day, weeks following the settling of the dust, I discovered a handmade plaque attached to the bridge. It said, "This land stood because one man did." I stood there looking at it, more humbled than I was proud. Because it wasn't just me. It was the groundskeeper who snuck tape onto my signs when everyone wasn't watching, the retired couple who delivered banana bread and a petition, the city hydrologist who heard without effect, and neighbors far too many who had been silenced for far too long. Now regaining pulse and breath. Folks still ask me why I didn't simply sell the land. Get out. Dodge the hassle. But every time I look at someone strolling their child along the creek bank or listen to the giggles in new garden plots by the creek, I have the same response, because I know land doesn't belong to power, it belongs to those who love it. And love means defending it even when it's simpler not to. Evergreen Bluffs is not the same place I first arrived. Lawn police ceased to measure grass. The loudest threats never came back. The people? They've evolved into something greater, community not controlled, but linked. The creek where it all began runs smooth now, still wild, but freer, and so am I for once.